How you doing, Ollie?
Very good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, good. I need a haircut. I only just realised now.
Well, it's the lockdown thing, isn't it? And this is too long as well.
Well, I'm going to be. I watched the movie last night. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot darker than I thought it was going to be. I was going to ask first what it was about this story that interested you and compelled you to tell it in feature length form.
Well, thank you. I'm really glad you enjoyed it. A lot of people have said that about it being darker than they expected. So, I mean, basically, obviously, it's based on a book, and that book really resonated with me. We made some quite big changes in the script, but the core thing at the book I thought was brilliant was this combination of. There's basically two things. There was the premise, which I loved, this idea of doing. I love genre fiction and doing an apocalyptic movie, but I'd never seen one of those in a boarding school, and I'd certainly never seen one like Mad Max in rural England. This kind of very British take on what that would be like. We've seen it in a lot of other places. So I loved that, and then more than that, the core of it, I love the idea of this story of taking that brutal and exciting, action-filled, violent environment, but focusing a story on what is essentially a boy missing his mother, and which is a very soft core to the film. And this idea of, I think when I first wrote it, I was interested. There were stories about people having what they called a real life crisis, which is like 20 somethings, which I was at the time, encountering what the real world's like and thinking, oh, it's a bit crap. And like this idea of, as a metaphor for, told through an apocalyptic thing of for all of life, of waiting for your mum to come along and make everything better, and she never does, because you're a grown up now and you got to fend for yourself. That's kind of like the narrative core of the story, and sort of taking what you've learned from your parents and applying it in life rather than hoping that they'll fix it all for you. That I thought was a really interesting core of an apocalyptic movie, which, having said all of that, was also supposed to be fun and actiony and all the other things.
I mean, you are right. It's not as fun being an adult. Do you get nostalgic? Do you get nostalgic for school? Because I remember when I was at school, I was sort of desperate to be anywhere else. But now, every time I get a letter for the post that has a kind of "you're late to pay this bill," I just think, God, what I do just to be moaning about geography homework,
Oh yeah, absolutely. I completely. I mean, funnily enough, my real life isn't much like what happened in schools, out in that all my schoolmates aren't dead now. So I'm lucky enough to still have the same mate, like my best mates are still my group of friends from school. So I get to sort of relive that quite often, and maybe that's why I'm fascinated by it and did a film based around it. But yeah, completely get that nostalgia all the time. I mean, God, wouldn't it be nice to live such a carefree life where all that mattered was how much time you were going to get to play that video game this evening.
I can't find any time to play video games these days. It's like, I'm not sure if it's guilt, but I used to be like a football manager. I'd smash through 15, 20 seasons in a night, and not anymore.
No, me too. I used to love it. I never play games now. In fact, it's quite nice to be working for Rebellion, but I never get to play any anymore. So yeah.
You mentioned at the beginning of the interview that I'm not the first person to say that they were quite surprised at how dark it is. Are you sort of pre-warning people and saying, oh, it's a bit darker, or do you quite like that element of surprise? Do you quite like it when someone says to you, I hadn't anticipated it being quite so dark?
No, I mean, I like it, and it was always intentional. So no, I don't forewarn people. I think that if I'm lucky enough to get to make another film at some point, I think people will see this in my work. I've always loved films that play with tone and genre, hopefully well. Like, this is the thing, it's a real rod for your own back to make, because you've got to manage it very well. But I love films that, I think that life is full of different tones. You laugh at funerals, I think that's how it is. And I love writers like Martin McDonagh, who play with darkness and humor well. And I also, I think that I wasn't involved in cutting the trailer, and I love the trailer for the film, but they have to, because it's a film of so many tones, they have to find an angle to sell it at. And yes, it does. That makes it seem like it's going to be a lot more, there's going to be a lot more levity in it than there is. I mean, there is some, obviously. but no, I like that. I like surprising people, and I don't think that a film needs to fit into a particular box. I think that, you know, that obviously is very helpful for people to talk about it. And I realize that on the end of like journalism and particularly marketing companies selling the film, it's quite difficult to like put it in a bracket if it's all over the place in terms of tone. But no, that's how I like it, and I want people to have that experience. But part of the plan was always, I wanted, when people were sitting through that library scene where Mac's smashing someone's head in with a massive book, to think back to the first scene with Anthony Head, the headmaster, and all the jokes in it, and go, how do we get there from here? But hopefully to have not have noticed that, it's like a sleight of hand thing. You know, you find yourself there gradually.
I mean, you are right. I mean, there is an inclination in this industry. Everyone has to label something, put it into a kind of genre. But how did you find that navigating that way around, navigating that when it came to kind of like financing and speaking to producers and stuff? Because I guess they need sometimes it to be put into such a short sentence of this is what my film is. Like you said, School's Out Forever is a whole myriad of genres, really, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, the honest answer to that, it really is that we got lucky with Rebellion in that. So we had, we'd been developing the script for about 10 years and trying to get it made. And we shopped it to various places. And several times we had like 50% financing, 75% financing. But it was always a sticking point, this kind of, well, what is it? And I think that Rebellion were willing to make it because they are actually, I mean, if you look back at their history, they made games like Alien versus Predator and Sniper Elite, and they mix genres, and they're a real genre factory. You know, they've got the whole of 2000 AD comics under their belt, and they love all that stuff. So I think the answer to the question is just finding the financiers who responded to it and got that it was this crazy mix of stuff, and they did, and they were always very supportive of that. You know, they had very little sort of nitpicks about that kind of thing. They loved when it was funny, they loved when it was dark. You know, yeah, they're a very good company to work for in that way. But it was a hard place to find. It was a hard film to find a home for that very reason, I think.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're dealing with a majority kind of young cast of relative newcomers. I just wondered what that kind of does to the spirit on set, because is there quite an infectious kind of enthusiasm that comes from that? Because it's something you might not get, I suppose, of kind of seasoned pros that have been there and done it. I guess when you've got a bunch of newcomers, they must all have this kind of fascination for the whole process, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it does. You're right. It does absolutely amazing things for the atmosphere on set is the basic answer. I mean, they were so up for it and so wanted it to be the best film it could be. And you know, I've worked with a lot of actors and like working with seasoned pros is amazing in some ways. It gives you so much in such a shorthand. But as you say, there is always an element of like, this is a job and then they're going to do another job. And then for these guys, it was everything really. It was like they wanted to make it as good as it possibly could be. And their energy was just incredible. I mean, also on like doing things like stunts and like there's bits in this film where when you see Mac crash through a whiteboard after he's jumped on that guy's neck, you know, that's Liam Fernandez throwing himself into a whiteboard with like, because he was just up for it, you know. With most actors that would be a double or it would be, you know, but he's a young guy full of energy and he was just like, no, I just want to do it. I just, you know, so and they all became good friends. I think I see them all interacting on Instagram now and stuff like they're still doing stuff together. So yeah, I think that really helped give an injection of energy into what was a very difficult shoot budget and time wise. So yeah, we kind of needed it, I think.
Yeah. So my final question is obviously speaking about how great all the young cast members are. It must have been so helpful still to have the likes of Alex MacQueen and Anthony Head, not just for the other younger cast members, but even for yourself, because obviously as a debut feature film. Yeah.
No, I all three of them, so Samantha Bond, Anthony Head, and Alex were all people who I'd watched, you know, growing up in various things, and you know, so it was a real joy to work with them. Anthony, I mean, Alex and Samantha were just brilliant throughout, and really, you know, we were talking earlier about seasoned actors just treated it like didn't treat it like it was any lesser of a film or a low budget film. They really just brought everything to it. And Anthony was such a boon for the film, not just because he's Giles from Buffy and very well known and all that. He's a very, very funny, charming man. And we were shooting with him on, I think, the first day of principal photography was those scenes with Anthony in the headmaster's office. And he really leads from the front, and it really helped me out because he was joking and making everybody laugh, and he was very calm. And that, I think, just gave the whole crew, particularly, and the rest of the cast, this feeling of like, oh, it's okay. Like, we're, there's Anthony Head, and he's like fine, and he's thumbs up, and it's all going well. So it must be good, And I think that really helped.
Brilliant, cool. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure, and hopefully, by the time you make your next movie, we'll be able to do things like this in person. Who knows? Yeah,
absolutely. That would be lovely. Thank you, Stefan.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey You